What is up, YouTube? It's Kingfisher745, and welcome back to the All Hail the King segment from podcasts past. This is a series that many of you may not remember, and some of you may not have even seen before. But don't worry, we're going to have an extended intro where I explain what this series is once again. And this was always one that I meant to come back to, because I enjoyed it, and I know some of you did as well. So basically, what we do in this series is we revisit an old podcast. Some of these segments have even been lost, so it's going to give a lot of you a chance to hear old segments that you may have missed or otherwise would not be exposed to. We're going to include the actual original audio, usually after a brief intro. So in the second half of this video, you're going to hear that original segment. What most of these All Hail the King podcast bits talk about is some sort of team-up idea for video. These are going to feature some really awesome team-ups. Some of the most powerful ones in the game, or at least that were in the game. And so what this series is going to do is go back and explore these team-ups and these ideas and see if they still work in today's PvP. There have been a lot of changes in PvP, especially recently, so some of these teams may fail miserably. But that's what we're here to find out. It's also pretty interesting and sometimes embarrassing for myself to hear our old segments, or really to hear myself talk in general. So on top of everything else, you'll see how I've changed, how the segment has come along, and how I've progressed, or maybe even regressed. But that's pretty much the basic rundown of the series itself. As far as the video, there's going to be a short intro, and that'll be something along these lines. I believe this particular segment debuted on, let me look it up real quick, April 8th, 2014. And the idea was to make a really difficult to damage team. I referred to them as being resilient. Emma Frost at the beginning of this one didn't look too resilient though. But you're going to notice this team take very little damage from here on out. And yes, we are using some tweaks to this original design, but the essence is still there. However, instead of the Fist of the Colossus, we're just going to use the Techno-Organic Endoskeleton. That's in part because we know there's a lot of Emma Frosts out there. The other difference is we're using the Lantern of Doom and the Oni Breaker. And that of course is going to make us very tough. It's going to stop debuffs for that first round, give us a heal and a shield, plus the Oni Breaker reduces damage and can stop dots. We just have to maintain 100% health and we're golden. And that's not going to be that hard to do. At least not with this team. The only other real issue that I'm going to point out is these matches are extremely long. That's just today's PvP. So, where there would have been a shorter intro, we kind of have to go longer to cover the length. Now, Emma Frost of course was killed first turn before any other action by Spitfire. That was really impressive. But she is very capable of doing that. If Emma was here, and we've also changed her to an infiltrator by the way, this fight would have been much easier. Instead though, I think it's going to show a lot about this team. It probably proves even more with her being knocked out, and them still standing strong. Maybe you never even thought about Volstagg this way, or you long since forgot him, but he is definitely a tank, and he can certainly help you win in PvP. Plus, remember that invincible agent I was always talking about? Well, this isn't exactly it. We don't even have the Bruiser E-ISO, aka the Elite E-ISO. But he definitely isn't going down easy. He's basically, for lack of a better word, a juggernaut. Oh, it's the juggernaut! So in other words, we're going to win this. It's going to take some time, but we're going to win. And by the way, speaking of a really resilient team, of course Colossus is used a lot today. So there is him and many other options that you could try out here. But the original segment did focus on Volstagg, who did see some action but only with other Warriors 3. Oh, and I'll be honest with you about these segments, I don't even remember them. So when I listen back to them, it's definitely always a surprise. Sometimes it even makes me think, wow, that's a good idea, how did I forget about this? So hopefully you get about that same effect, and I do hope you enjoy this series. Oh, one other thing that I should mention, the original segments are only about 5 minutes or less. Very rarely does it go over. So if you want to skip ahead to that, that's totally fine, but like I said, battles these days are so long that we're going to have to finish this first one and begin the second, and we'll still have 5 more minutes, or thereabout. So after losing Emma Frost, we still easily won this match, and we finished at nearly full HP. Because of the way that one started, I think it was a pretty impressive win, but this next team is probably one you wanted to see. And let me just also say this was my first 2 battles with this team. So you're seeing number 1 and 2, none cut out. I didn't even need to do any more, they proved their point. And I figured let's go ahead and make this episode. So before we get into the segment, and it's coming very soon, I just wanted to say that I did enjoy using this team. And as far as I can tell, they are worthy of use. So they get my still viable seal of approval. Feel free to try them out. Either way though, I hope you enjoy the video, as well as the series as a whole, and I'll try to keep this one going, rather than taking another big break. And without further ado, here's the original segment. What's going on everybody, it's Kingfisher745, and this is the All Hail the King segment, only on the From the Helicarrier podcast. Now for today's topic, I actually tested out a few ideas, and I decided to go with the team up that I briefly mentioned before. It may not be a game-breaking team or even a guaranteed win, but they are extremely resilient. The team up that I'm speaking of is Emma Frost and Volstagg. First, before we get started, we're going to need a team name. Sometimes this can be the hardest part, but let's go with Team Resiliency, aka the Durable Duo. Alright, so what makes this team interesting? Well, Volstagg has an ability called Guard the Rear. This gives your entire team covered, meaning they'll take 50% damage from all attacks. Couple that with Emma Frost and Diamond Body, not to mention her Eternal Empowered ISO 8, and you have a really hard to damage team. Now that's the basic thought process behind this team up, but allow me to go a little bit more into the details. Starting with your agent, you can make him pretty difficult to damage as well. If you have these weapons, you could use something like the Fist of the Colossus, which will give him very high crit resistance. This also will make him immune to bleeding, burning, and chilled. Another item that I did test out that you may want to bring back is the Emerald Prism. Trust me, I'll make sure to try out these varying weapon combinations in the accompanying video. However, one item that I do recommend always using with this team up is the Asgardian Tankard. This item will restore health and stamina to your agent, remove debuffs, give you well fed, and it grants your entire team their class benefit. Because of this reason, I like using a tactician armor on my agent. This means that once he drinks, he'll gain an extra turn. The same thing goes for Emma, who you should also be using as a tactician. And then last but not least, Volstagg will gain both Bruiser and Scrapper powers, so he becomes enraged and gains a follow-up attack. Now just in case all that isn't enough, Volstagg also drinks, giving himself health and stamina, removing debuffs, and gaining well fed. Then Team Resiliency gains Cast Iron Stomach, taking reduced damage from damage over time effects. The other good news is they did fix the Asgardian Tankard, meaning that Volstagg could also initiate all this by using his level 6. Well, I think that the toughness part of this team is pretty evident, but if you were wondering about damage, you don't have to worry that much. First off, you have Emma Frost. She was pretty powerful before, but now that they have the maddening augmented ISO 8, she's downright scary. You can equip this AISO to any psychic attack, and it will cause that attack to apply Weak Mind, so that increases the damage taken by psychic attacks and effects by 50%. This is incredible on both her mental trauma and her psychic tap. Using her psychic tap, for example, will apply Weak Mind and Mental Anguish, and then when that target attacks, and trust me, the AI is stupid enough to attack, I've seen the Mental Anguish deal around 40,000 damage. That's at level 300, but that's practically the entire HP bar. Plus, the fact that she's a tactician means Havoc teams, and anyone using the new empowered armor, which happens to be a blaster armor, means you're going to get 2 attacks and potentially 2 psychic taps. So that's one way to help deal with that overpowered Havoc team. Another thing that you may want to consider is using an Orfrost mace on your agent. So if you have the mace equipped and a tactician armor, you should be able to protect against his attack, and then even if he does hit you with that one-hit knockout, you'll still stay alive, grant sacrificial strength to your team, and gain an extra turn, meaning that you can now use the Asgardian Tankard At least it has some sort of heal, and it's going to give Emma Frost and Volstagg all the benefits. So yeah, in testing this team worked out pretty well, but I have no idea how they would work out on defense. Usually you want to be pretty simplistic on defense, and personally I usually go with a high attack and aggressive team. With that being said, if you want to try something different and have some fun on offense, I do recommend this team. I'll show you how they perform for me in the corresponding video segment that'll be posted tomorrow evening. Oh, and one last thing to note, this team is going to become so much better when the Tactician Empowered costume is released. Anyways, that's going to be it for today's segment. I thank you all for listening, and I want to send it back to Agents Ibbott and McFall.